I watched Marcus's face go pale as the board members leaned forward in their leather chairs, their eyes locked on the grocery store cashier sitting at the mahogany table. Not a single executive was checking their phone, not one. In that moment, I understood something that would unravel everything I'd built over the past 15 years. The woman in the simple blue Walmart vest wasn't supposed to be here. She wasn't supposed to know, and she definitely wasn't supposed to have the proof. But let me back up. 6 months earlier, my life looked like something out of a success magazine. I'm Marcus Chen, 42 years old, CEO of Pinnacle Financial Group, the kind of company that makes money move money. We manage portfolios for Fortune 500 companies, handle mergers worth hundreds of millions, and our office occupies 3 floors of the Riverside Tower in downtown Denver, the kind of place where the coffee costs $7 and the conference room views overlook the whole city. My wife Sarah and I lived in Cherry Creek, the neighborhood where surgeons and tech entrepreneurs raise their kids. Our house was a 1920s colonial, renovated to perfection. Marble countertops, smart home system, a wine cellar that probably cost more than most people's cars. Every Sunday we'd walk our golden retriever, Gatsby, past the other trophy homes, and I'd feel this quiet satisfaction. This was the life I'd earned. My parents immigrated with 2 suitcases and taught me that hard work and intelligence could buy you anything in America. They were right. Sarah worked part-time as an interior designer, which meant she had flexibility to manage our social calendar. We threw dinner parties where investment bankers and lawyers would talk about vacation homes in Aspen. My kids, David, 16, and Emma, 13, attended private school, had tutors, took piano and lacrosse lessons. Emma wanted to go to Yale. David was already being courted by college scouts. Everything was locked in. Everything was perfect. At least, that's what I told myself. The truth is, I'd been cutting corners at the office for about 2 years. Nothing illegal, not technically. We had a client, Meridian Real Estate Trust, managing about $450 million in commercial property funds. Their quarterly performance was mediocre. The market was soft, some of their properties were underperforming, and investors were getting nervous. So I got creative with the reports. Nothing fraudulent on paper. The numbers were technically accurate, but the narrative was shaped. Certain underperforming assets were bundled into reports that highlighted our best work. Meridian's investors saw a rosy picture. Meridian's leadership saw a rosy picture. Everyone was happy. My commission on their account was $2.3 million a year. That bought the house. That bought the private school. That bought the lifestyle. Then, about 8 weeks ago, something shifted. I started getting emails from an auditor named Jennifer Walsh at Meridian. She was new, had just been hired to do a deep dive into their fund performance. She was asking questions, detailed questions, about asset allocation, about our reporting methodologies, about why certain properties seemed to disappear from quarterly reviews only to reappear later with different valuations. I answered her emails professionally, confidently. I was good at this part, making complexity sound reasonable, making gray areas sound gray instead of black. But Jennifer kept digging. Last Tuesday, everything changed. I was in my office on the 34th floor, reviewing the quarterly numbers one more time when my assistant Rachel knocked on my door. "There's someone here to see you," she said, looking confused. "She doesn't have an appointment. She says it's about Meridian." "Send them in," I said, assuming it was Jennifer Walsh. It wasn't. The woman who walked through my door was probably in her mid-50s, with tired eyes and work-worn hands. She wore a blue Walmart vest over street clothes. Her name tag said, Carol. I had never seen her before in my life. "Mr. Chen," she said, sitting down without waiting to be invited. "My name is Carol Mathers. I'm Jennifer Walsh's mother." I felt something cold slide down my spine. "I'm sorry, I don't understand." "Jennifer's my daughter," Carol interrupted. "She works as an auditor. She's been trying to tell you people that something's wrong with your reports for 6 weeks now. You've been ignoring her, blocking her, making her job harder." Carol pulled a folder from a bag at her feet. "So she brought me everything. Every email, every spreadsheet, every discrepancy. She didn't think anyone was listening, so she talked to her mom." My hands felt numb. Ms. Mathers, I'm not sure what you think you know, but I know you're lying, she said flatly. I know you're showing investors one picture, and reality is a different picture. My daughter's an honest woman. She's been doing this job for 20 years, and she's never seen anything like this. It's kept her up at night. I stood up. I think you need to leave. If you have concerns about our reporting, you can file a formal complaint with— I already did, Carol said. She stood too and handed me an envelope. The SEC, the Colorado Division of Securities, and I gave copies to the Meridian Board. They're meeting tomorrow morning. The board wants to talk to you. They want to hear from you directly why their reports don't match their actual portfolio performance. She walked to the door, then turned back. My daughter makes $38,000 a year, Carol said. She's been a single mom since her husband left. She's put 3 kids through community college. She does everything right. And people like you make her life harder, because you think rules are suggestions for people who aren't rich enough to break them. Carol opened the door. The board meeting is tomorrow at 9. You should probably bring a lawyer. After she left, I sat in my chair for a long time. My office suddenly felt smaller. The view of Denver, which had always made me feel powerful, now made me feel exposed. I called my lawyer, Richard Huang, immediately. He was quiet for a long time after I explained what had happened. How bad is it? I asked. Potentially very bad, Richard said. If the SEC thinks there's fraud, even civil fraud, they can freeze accounts, launch an investigation that takes years, and meanwhile your reputation is destroyed. But let's see what they actually have first. That night I told Sarah everything. She was sitting in the kitchen when I came home, and the moment she saw my face, she knew something was wrong. I explained the situation. I tried to make it sound like a misunderstanding, like an overzealous auditor who didn't understand how modern portfolio management works. Sarah didn't say anything for a very long time. Then she stood up and walked out of the room. She went upstairs. I heard the shower running. She didn't come down for dinner. When I tried to go to bed around midnight, she was already asleep, or pretending to be, facing the wall, her back to me. That's when I realized this wasn't just about work anymore. This was about everything. The board meeting started at 9 o'clock sharp on a Wednesday morning in the Meridian Real Estate Trust offices, located in the Lodo district of Denver. I arrived with Richard Huang, my attorney, both of us dressed in dark suits, like we were attending a funeral. In a way, we were. The boardroom was exactly what I expected: polished walnut table, leather chairs, city views that made the Riverside Tower look modest. What I didn't expect was Carol Mathers sitting at the far end of the table with a stack of file folders in front of her. Jennifer Walsh, the auditor, sat beside her mother, her eyes red from crying, but her jaw set firm. Next to them was a third woman I didn't recognize, mid-60s, sharp eyes, business suit that probably cost more than Carol's annual salary. The SEC investigator, I assumed. Marcus Ellsworth, the Meridian board chairman, gestured for me to sit. He was in his 70s, old money, the kind of man who'd seen a lot in his life, but rarely looked rattled. Today, he looked rattled. Mr. Chen, Marcus began, his voice careful and measured. We've reviewed the materials presented to us yesterday. Before we proceed, I want to be clear. This is not a witch hunt. This is an opportunity for you to explain discrepancies between your quarterly reports and the actual performance data Jennifer has uncovered. Do you understand? I nodded, my throat dry. Richard leaned forward slightly, a signal that I should let him speak first. My client has prepared a statement, Richard said, sliding a document across the table. Mr. Chen takes his fiduciary responsibilities very seriously, and we believe there's been a misunderstanding regarding— There's no misunderstanding, Carol Mathers interrupted. She didn't raise her voice, but every word landed like a hammer strike. My daughter has been trying to tell you people for 6 weeks that your numbers don't match reality. You ignored her. You made her job harder. You sent her emails saying her concerns were procedural in nature. Procedural. Carol opened the first folder. "Let me walk you through what my daughter found." For the next 2 hours, Jennifer methodically presented the evidence. She showed spreadsheets, actual portfolio performance versus what Pinnacle had reported. She displayed emails where I'd explained away her questions with corporate jargon that sounded reasonable, but meant nothing. She presented a timeline showing how certain underperforming commercial properties had been removed from quarterly reports, only to reappear in the next quarter, bundled with better performers, making the entire fund look healthier than it was. The numbers were damning. A Meridian office complex in Austin that had lost 12% of its value was reported as gaining 3%. A multifamily unit in Phoenix that sat 70% vacant was listed as 85% occupied. A retail strip mall in Denver, the one right here in Meridian's own backyard, was so obviously underperforming that Jennifer had actually visited it in person. She showed photos, empty storefronts, broken windows, a for lease sign with a phone number that hadn't been answered in 3 months. "The retail property alone," Jennifer said quietly, "is worth roughly $40 million less than what Pinnacle reported to investors in their last quarterly filing. $40 million. I felt Richard's hand on my arm, a warning to stay silent. "My question," Jennifer continued, looking directly at me, "is whether this was accidental or intentional. Because there's a pattern here. The misrepresentations always go one direction, always making things look better, never worse. That's not accounting error, Mr. Chen. That's fraud." The word hung in the air like a gunshot. "Those are serious allegations," Marcus Ellsworth said, his voice harder now. "Mr. Chen, do you have an explanation?" I opened my mouth, closed it. Every explanation I'd prepared suddenly sounded hollow, even to me. "The market was soft," I finally managed. "Property valuations are subjective. Different methodologies produce different—" "Stop," Carol Mathers said. She stood up and walked to the whiteboard at the side of the room. "I want to tell you something about my daughter. Jennifer makes $38,000 a year. She's a single mother. She works 50-hour weeks. She puts herself through continuing education courses to stay certified. She's put 3 children through community college and is currently helping her youngest with his bachelor's degree." Carol picked up a dry erase marker and wrote 2 numbers on the board. $2.3 million, Carol said, circling the first number. "That's what Pinnacle Financial has been collecting in annual fees from Meridian Real Estate Trust for managing $450 million. Management fees that, according to your contract, are based on the assumption that you're providing accurate, timely reporting." She circled the second number, $38,000. "And this is what my daughter makes. For telling the truth, for doing her job exactly right, for caring enough to bring her concerns to her mother when the powerful people she worked for wouldn't listen." Carol turned back to face me. "My daughter isn't here to get rich. She's here because her integrity means something to her. I'm wondering, Mr. Chen, what your integrity was worth." The room was absolutely silent. Marcus Ellsworth cleared his throat. "Mr. Chen, I think we need to suspend this meeting. The board will be referring all findings to the SEC and the Colorado Division of Securities. Meridian is also immediately freezing all accounts managed by Pinnacle Financial Group, effective immediately. That includes the $450 million you've been managing for us." Richard was already on his feet, motioning for me to stand. "My client will cooperate fully with any investigation, but I advise against further questions without legal counsel present." As we moved toward the door, Marcus Ellsworth called out, "One more thing, Mr. Chen. Meridian is also filing a civil lawsuit against Pinnacle Financial for breach of fiduciary duty and fraudulent misrepresentation. I'd expect service papers within the week." The drive back to Pinnacle's offices was silent, except for Richard's voice on the phone, calling our insurance carrier, calling other attorneys he knew, making arrangements for what was coming next. My phone buzzed constantly. News travels fast in the financial world. Clients were calling. Some wanted out of their contracts. Others were threatening lawsuits. Our stock price, if we'd been public, would have been in free fall. By the time I reached the Riverside Tower, I'd already received an email from the board of directors at Pinnacle requesting my immediate resignation. The board, my board, the men I'd built this company with. I didn't go to my office. I went straight to my car and drove home to Cherry Creek. Sarah was still there. I'd half expected her to be gone. She was sitting in the kitchen, our kitchen with its marble countertops and smart appliances, looking at her phone. When she saw me, she set it down slowly. "It's on the news," she said quietly. "The local stations are already reporting it. Denver financial firm under investigation for fraud. They're not naming you yet, but they will." I sat down at the table. For the first time in years, I felt the weight of everything. Not just the fraud, but the lying. The careful construction of a false life. The compartmentalization I'd gotten so good at that I'd almost convinced myself it was all fine. "I'm sorry," I said. "Are you?" Sarah asked. Not angry, curious. "Or are you just sorry you got caught?" The question hung between us like a blade. "I don't know anymore," I admitted. That night, Sarah slept in our guest room. Emma and David came home from school and immediately sensed something was wrong. I didn't tell them what had happened. Not yet. I just said there were some business issues to work through and that everything would be okay. Emma didn't believe me. David knew better than to ask. The next morning, the story broke nationally. CEO of Denver investment firm charged with securities fraud. The photos they used were from a company event 2 years ago. Me in a tuxedo, Sarah in an evening gown, both of us smiling like life was perfect. The contrast was brutal. My phone rang constantly, journalists wanting comment, clients demanding explanations. My parents calling from California, their voices breaking as they realized their son, the boy they'd sacrificed everything for, the proof that the American dream was real, had thrown it away. By Friday, the SEC had launched a formal investigation. By Monday, I'd been suspended from Pinnacle pending a full internal review. By Tuesday, Richard was advising me to consider a plea deal because the evidence was overwhelming and a trial would only extend the pain. The house in Cherry Creek sold within 3 weeks. Sarah's decision, not mine. We needed the money for legal fees. We moved to a rental in a middle-class neighborhood, the kind of place I used to drive through and feel grateful I didn't live there anymore. The kids transferred to public school. Emma stopped talking about Yale. David stopped taking calls from college scouts. 3 months into the investigation, I was officially charged with wire fraud and securities fraud. The potential sentence was 20 years. 20 years! I was 42 years old. If I went to prison, I'd be 62 when I got out, if I got out at all. But something unexpected happened during the legal proceedings. The SEC investigator, the woman who'd been in the boardroom, reached out to my attorney. Jennifer Walsh had been offered a settlement by Meridian, $250,000 for her role in uncovering the fraud. She'd turned it down. Instead, she'd requested that the money be donated to a financial literacy nonprofit that worked with low-income families. When I learned that, something in me shifted. I stopped fighting. I stopped letting Richard construct elaborate defenses. I called him one afternoon and told him I wanted to take a plea deal, full cooperation with the SEC, all details of how the fraud had been perpetrated, every name of everyone involved in the cover-up. Not to get a reduced sentence, just to stop lying. The plea agreement included a 90-month sentence, 7.5 years. Richard thought I was insane to accept it, when we might have negotiated for less. But I knew something he didn't. I needed to pay, not because the law demanded it, but because I demanded it of myself. The day I entered federal prison in Englewood, Colorado, Sarah brought the kids to say goodbye. Emma cried. David stood with his arms crossed, angry at me for being the kind of person who could do this. Sarah didn't cry. She just held my hand for a moment and said, "I hope you find something in here worth being when you get out." In prison, I worked as a tutor in the education program. I taught math and basic accounting. Not ironic, I thought, given my history. I read books I'd never had time for when I was chasing money. I wrote letters to my children, trying to explain what I'd done and why, knowing the explanations would never be adequate. 2 years into my sentence, Jennifer Walsh visited me. It was strange seeing her in the prison visitation room, the woman who'd destroyed my life, sitting across from me in a plastic chair with vending machines humming in the background. "I wanted to see if you were real," she said without preamble, "or if you were just a type, the kind of man who only changes when he's forced to." "I don't know yet," I told her honestly. "Ask me again in 5 years." "I might," she said. Then she added, "My mother came to the auditor convention last month. She was telling people about how her daughter did the right thing. She was proud. That's not a small thing, Mr. Chen. That pride. It's worth more than the money you lost." She left after 10 minutes. That was all she wanted, confirmation that I wasn't just a type. Now, in my final year of incarceration, I understand what Sarah meant when she said she hoped I'd find something worth being. I found it. Not in money or status or the approval of people who don't matter. I found it in the small moment when I decided to tell the truth, finally, completely, without negotiation. I found it in the fact that Jennifer Walsh's integrity meant something, and it mattered enough to change everything. When I get out next year, I'll be 49 years old. Sarah has filed for divorce. I don't blame her. My relationship with David is still fractured, though Emma visits sometimes. I'll have a felony record, no professional licenses, and no ability to work in finance again. But I'll have something else. I'll know what I'm actually worth.